Hi everybody, Year 2 have been reading Bob and the Moon Tree mystery as part of their Vipers, so here is the full story, and the story is by Simon Bartram. It was a Friday morning in space. Bob, the man on the moon, and his best ever friend Barry were hard at work, giving the dark side of the moon a tip-top tidy-up. And that's when they noticed it, a strange beamy seedy thing, glowing near crater 1973. Bob was puzzled. Despite being the world's most brainy moon expert, he'd never seen anything like it before. He knelt down to get a closer look. Suddenly, the beamy seedy thing sprang up and briskly bounced away. Bob and Barry looked at each other in astonishment. Whatever could it be? Wasting no time, Bob and Barry set off. The chase was on. All afternoon they huffed and puffed until finally the beamy seedy thing jumped deep, deep down into the darkness of crater 483. By now it was 6:45 p.m, so Bob and Barry had to blast back home quick sharp or risk missing the big match on TV. Bob wasn't too worried though. After all, what could happen to a beamy seedy thing in just one night? Back on Earth, Bob couldn't stop thinking about their peculiar discovery. What was the beamy seedy thing doing on the moon? How did it get there? Some people might have suggested it was the work of aliens, but Bob knew that was just nonsense. He was still worrying about it the next morning as they rocketed moonwards. All of a sudden his thoughts were interrupted by an almighty shuddering, shaking crunch. The moon's surface was still a mile below them. "We've crashed!" gasped Bob. "But into what?" Cautiously, Bob opened the rocket hatch. When he clambered out to see what it was, he was truly amazed. Their rocket was nestled in the branches of a gigantic, spectacular tree. As tall as a skyscraper, it had shot up directly from crater 483. It was all very odd indeed. Important questions began to ping around Bob's brain. A moon tree, he marvelled. Where could it have come from? And more importantly, why is it here? Though still baffled, over the next few days Bob and Barry came to love the moon tree. It was not only breathtakingly beautiful, but tremendous fun too. Bob made a moon buggy tyre swing and built a tree house where they could enjoy a mini Scotch egg and a bone before their lunchtime game of hide and seek amongst the leaves. Word about the moon tree soon got back to Earth, and before long tourists were flocking to see Bob's space chimp impressions and moon tree acrobatics. Then one morning Bob was greeted with another surprise. The moon tree's branches had sprouted strange golden pod-like berry whatsits. Sparkling between the leaves, they looked mysterious and precious. Bob and Barry gasped at their beauty. He wasn't sure why, but somehow Bob just knew that the golden podberries were terribly important. News of the golden podberries spread quickly. Day after day, more space tourists arrived, astounded at the incredible sight. Many bought souvenirs. Soap-on-a-rope podberries in particular sold like hotcakes. But Bob had to explain again and again that the golden podberries were absolutely not for sale. No way, no how. Neither, of course, was the moon tree itself, though he still didn't know why it was there. Bob did know that it was his job to protect it, and protect it he would. Each day Bob cleaned and polished every podberry. Then he would hug the tree trunk as he'd read somewhere that this was most important. He cordoned off the moon tree with bright red rope and designed a special hands-off sign. Unfortunately, he'd missed out an O, but he was sure that the message was still clear. Under Bob's watchful eye, every single leaf and podberry would be totally safe. The moon tree was in good hands. But that night in the treehouse, Bob and Barry were rudely awoken by a noisy rustling sound. Suddenly, everything began to shake. Slowly at first, then faster and faster, backwards and forwards and side to side. Bob looked at Barry. "Moonquake!" he bellowed. Completely helpless, they rattled around the room until with an enormous whoosh, Bob, Barry, the treehouse and every last podberry were catapulted away from the moon tree and out into the universe. Through a thinning sea of podberries, Bob and Barry looked down wide-eyed at the moon. A crack had appeared at the base of the moon tree, and as the moonquake continued, the crack grew wider and wider. Finally, the moon tree was completely uprooted, and it too floated upwards towards the stars. In silence, Bob and Barry watched as it glided gracefully past the treehouse and disappeared into the distance. The moon tree was gone. Bob and Barry were both exhausted, so in spite of the exciting events of the day, they were soon snoring soundly in the drifting treehouse. Curiously, by the time they woke up, there wasn't a single podberry to be seen anywhere. But instead of being upset, Bob was strangely calm. It felt like it was all meant to be. The treehouse sailed aimlessly through space until at last Tony Vanilla's ice cream rocket jingled by. Kindly, Tony gave Bob and Barry a free choc ice each, then towed them back to the moon. The missing moon tree left a big gap in the lunar landscape. Luckily, they had no time to feel glum. There was moon dust to sweep, leaves to rake, and the crack in the moon's surface had to be carefully superglued shut. When Bob and Barry finally got home to Earth, it was late. The drama, however, wasn't quite over. As they walked up their garden path, something fell out of the sky and plopped into the fish pond. Bob scooped it out at once and couldn't believe his eyes. It was a golden podberry. From the curl of his quiff to the tips of his toes, Bob was bamboozled. As he enjoyed his midnight dippy egg with toasty astronauts, he wondered what the whole mysterious moon tree business had been about. None of his questions had been answered. All around town there was a chit-chat and rumour. Most people were convinced that aliens had something to do with the extraordinary events, but Bob knew that was nonsense. All intelligent people know there's no such thing as an alien. It'll probably turn out to be one of those great unsolved mysteries of the universe, said Bob to Barry as they headed upstairs to bed. After all, if we can't work out what's going on, who can? Hope you enjoyed the story. Bye.